Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas in 1990. So here we are, here it is. This is 4K and it's a really stunning 4K. But yes, we are reviewing Goodfellas, of course. Been really looking forward to this. I've been doing a couple of Scorsese's before this, of course, and yeah, I really looked forward to this one, and because it is, of course, yeah, it's the most popular Scorsese. Overall, even more so than Taxi Driver. If you look at online, just everything, and just people, what people talk about as their favourite, it's usually, Goodfellas is overall, I would say, the most popular. And of course, critics like Roger Ebert and everyone, they would say it's actually, one of the best, if not the best film of the 90s. And yeah, it's in terms of popularity, at times up there with The Godfather, in terms of gangster films. And yes, I absolutely love this film. I think it's another one. Here we go. That's on my favourite films list. That I'll be reviewing as part, this month. Kind of every day I'll be doing one. And yeah, Goodfellas is very, very significant for me in terms of my film watching. And I think I watched it around about the age of 11, something like that. Give or take a year each way. But yes, when I first discovered it, it was a revelation for me. I could not believe it. It was just something that, yeah, I was transfixed. And then I think around about the time I rewatched it quite a few times, all the way through, because I loved it so much, and just became obsessed with it. Immediately, made it onto my among my favourite films, and it's still one of my favourite films. Not quite as high as it was, because over that 10 years or so, since I've seen many, many more films, and this, as I've said before, the kind of Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas, they switch very so much every sort of year or so. Sometimes it's very, very hard for me to decide. I've still not decided, between them three. And I've watched them all again, rewatched them within this month really, and I'm still stumped. It's very, very hard. And as I've said before, it's weird. It never happens with another director's another director's three films. It just never happens. Not even Spielberg or anyone like that. It's just these three, and they're very different. In a way, but any similarities as they have to Niro and stuff in them. But yes, this film is one of the most critically acclaimed, and yeah, Roger Ebert would actually say the best film about the mob ever made. And yeah, I watched it, rewatched it again tonight. I actually already saw it. I watched it this year again as well, beginning of the year. I think it was February, and yeah, the 4K is stunning, as I say, and the film is something else. Easily one of the finest films of all time. And I can understand how some people would put it in their top 10 and stuff. And, it's not for me. I'll say it's not as good for me as the Godfather films, the first two. Of course, it's better than three. But I don't think it's on that level. But and it's not. I don't think it's quite as good as Once Upon a Time in America. But really, apart from them and a couple, maybe one or two other ones, I think it is one of the absolute greatest gangster films, and just films in general. It's of course Rob De Niro once again, and that had a lot to do with the actual getting Scorsese, actually being allowed to make this film, and stuff. And obviously, many things happened, and his career, commercially and stuff, it was taking a bit of a dip in the 80s. After Raging Bull, United Artists, went under and stuff like that. Got everything happened there, but Goodfellas was one that brought him back really in terms of commercial success, and just people saying he's back, and yeah, many say it's his best film, and it's of course got De Niro in it, who is my favourite actor, and this film as well. It's co-written by Nicholas Pileggi once again, and Scorsese himself, of course, and directed, of course, by Scorsese. Film of Schoonmaker, once again, editing the film with Scorsese, and this film, is just absolutely stunning. 1990, still not quite the best film of that year for me. And of course, many people over the years have actually, it's a bit controversial with the Oscars and stuff, but I won't really talk about that. Maybe that'll be another review of a film that is to do with that, but very, very soon. But yeah, I think Joe Pesci won as well, supporting actor, and rightfully so. The cast in this film are stunning. Lorraine Bracco as well, Paul Sorvino. Of course, Joe Pesci is on fire in this film. What a wonderful, great actor he was when he was making quite a lot of films like this, Scorsese films. Cannot wait to see him, return, in The Irishman. And of course, De Niro. He's not, although he is on the front, in the middle and stuff, and all the posters. He's not the main characters. Of course, Ray Liotta plays Henry Hill, and Ray Liotta in this film gives the finest performance of the entire film. He's stunning in this. Of course, it's all based on a real life kind of case and everything, and the wise guy of the book, and just Scorsese does something else with this film. Just so much masterful filmmaking, and just the way that this film flows, the way it was very, very different, of course, for a gangster film, and many have said, of course, it's always said that it's not, doesn't romanticize like the Godfather films did. I don't think the Godfather films did really, in the ways, a lot of the ways people say. Yes, it was glamorous and everything, but really the Godfather films, I think they were just kind of just showing the humanity within that. I don't think it was glorifying that at all, and never does this. But of course, this is much more gritty kind of take on it, and it has such a natural feel to this film, and just the way that this film is written and everything, it's just like it's actually happening. The how the mob actually acts, and what once again that Scorsese does though, this it's kind of present, and not too many people talk about it, throughout his films. Really, his best films in particular, Raging Bull even. There's this comedy that goes throughout the film, and really, it's like watching a comedy. And this is a gangster film, and it's just the way he does this. It kind of just it straight away it adds a more relatable feel to it, and it makes it more grounded. It makes it more human. It brings humanity into it when he brings the comedy into it, and it's a very natural comedy. The way it's written, of course, is stunning, and the performances. Joe Pesci in particular, he's a character that is so funny in this film, but it's someone who is mental and evil. At times it switches in between. The funny house scene very early on. And sometimes quite striking to actually realise how early that is. It's in the first 20 minutes of the film that it begins, and that scene just shows how Scorsese and everyone involved do the comedy, but also at the same time it's quite striking, scary and stuff, and intense. And he does this throughout most of the film. This film, of course, portrays the lives of these guys from around about 1955 to 1980. The rise and fall, and of course, Scorsese would always kind of return to this kind of this way of doing things. The rise and the fall, and rightfully so. Most people love this sort of thing in cinema in general. Even Citizen Kane has this. There's so many films that kind of chronicle the rise and fall, and I think it just makes in general for compelling cinema if done well. And this film is compelling. The way that the energy to this film as well is something else. But yeah, the performances are all so good. Joe Pesci probably the greatest performance he's given, and rightfully so, won his Oscar, and Ray Liotta, of course, off the charts. De Niro once again, probably in his top 10 performances. Lorraine Bracco, she is amazing in this film, really something else. And it just the beginning of the film, of course, first sort of 15 minutes is basically Henry Hill, younger, and it begins with him kind of finding his way into the mob, and you see kind of some of his home life and everything, and of course throughout the whole film it is mainly narrated by Ray Liotta, and features some of the best for me narration in cinema. I just think it's so good. The way he kind of interacts with you as a viewer, the narration, it's just amazing, and very, very natural, and just wonderful. It's not it's no Blade Runner, that's for sure. That narration, the theatrical cut, it is something else. The narration in this film, and it's key for telling the story, as well as of course visually. Scorsese just moves the camera, and he just with such ease, just shows this rise, and we'll talk about that first. And of course, the first 15 minutes are key, and then of course it transitions to kind of when they're grown up, and of course the character of Tommy, played by Joe Pesci, And then there's of course Robert De Niro's character of Jimmy Conway, and just these three alone, these three characters together, the dynamics are just so so much fun, and it just makes for such memorable cinema. I feel the dialogue is just some of the best in film, and these three characters together are just so good. And this film is very, very violent, stylized, of course, at times. But basically, again, the approach, this kind of thing happens, so why hide it? Scorsese, he kind of showed it all. And this is the thing, one of the things the film does, it really does show the brutality, of the mafia and everything, the mob, and it just kind of doesn't hold back at all, and it's very, very graphic stuff. Of course, the famous bar scene, and the one in the car as well, which I won't talk about. Of course, most people, I guess, would have seen this film. Most people have seen it by now, but regardless, I'm not going to give any spoilers. So yeah, it just everyone involved was stunning, and the way that it just portrays this rise, it kind of has this constant, almost boundless energy. The camera, the way it moves, the editing is something else, and actually the editing gets better and better. And the final 20 minutes, there's that drug-fueled paranoia sequence, half an hour really. That's when the editing is even better, and it's almost disorientating. And it kind of makes you as a viewer anxious and paranoid. All part of the experience. But the editing throughout is just stunning. Cinematic perfection. The filmmaking is just unbelievable. And as I say, the way that the camera moves, all the tracking shots, the dolly zooms, and all that kind of stuff. The Copacabana scene is just one of my favourite moments in the film, and in a Scorsese film, full stop. Just the romantic feel that this film has, with the character of Karen and Henry. Again, among my favourite romances in cinema. And that just is so well done, so well written. The performances, stunning. Of course, it deals a lot with that drama as well, the family life throughout the film, and a very complex relationship. But she is just such a great character, and the kind of chemistry they have is something else. And of course, it only gets more and more compelling as the film goes on. And things take a turn, of course, halfway through, and then it just kind of, it's the downfall, the gradual downfall. And you could argue that it's even better, in the second half, and maybe not quite as energetic and in the way and kind of romantic and everything and stuff that the first half was, but as in terms of filmmaking, in terms of acting, in terms of actual tension and everything, it's probably better. This film is just remarkable. The soundtrack, of course, as well. Genius. What he done with kind of Mean Streets, he amps this up to 11 in this film. I think really, because you could say that the only film before this came out that he kind of was similar in the way he uses music was Mean Streets. The other ones, that I've seen anyway before Goodfellas, were not quite in that way, in that vein. Just the way he kind of uses it in the background and everything, and actual rock songs and everything, pop songs. And he does it in this film, and he does it even better than Mean Streets. Every song, really, you go through it, and not just as a soundtrack, it's a great soundtrack to actually listen to, but the way, if you go through it, and you look at every scene, and you actually kind of see how the songs relate to each scene, it's remarkable. The kind of care that went into it, and it also at the same time, just adds the authenticity, and natural feel that it brings back the time period so well, and always the perfect song choice by Scorsese. You have so much meaning to the songs, and then meaning it mirrors the actual scenes that it happens in. The Rolling Stones, of course, once again prominent in the film. My second favourite band. And yeah, Scorsese would use these quite a lot, this band and their songs, and it's just perfect. George Harrison, you've got Derek and the Dominoes, Layla, the piano exit, which once that comes on, that moment, it's a moment in cinema. You know, that scene where you see the victims and everything. You know, more than halfway through. By that point, I just thought, you know, the first time I saw it, this is one of the absolute finest films ever made. What a scope this film has, and a flow, and then just, you know, by the end of it, you feel you've covered so much ground. But you know, you can't quite believe it's almost over. And it's of course, it's got loads of emotion in the film. It's not just a, you know, a jolly kind of rise with these gangsters. It does have a lot of dark moments and emotional moments, touching moments, and the way he brings out the humanity in these kind of gangsters and stuff, just like The Godfather does, but very, very differently, of course. It's just something else, and the way he just involves you. You know, this is one of the key things he does. It's kind of like Casino as well. The way he just informs you. You know, Ray Liotta mainly narrates, of course, and you know, as well, just visually, the way the camera you see everything. You just observe as well, and you know, just it's so informative, and such a just so involving in the way the storytelling is, in this film, visually and, you know, through the sound, and it's just a film that you kind of just learn about the life of gangsters and stuff, and the mob, and you know, as well, the themes that he explores and everything, that are prevalent in films like Raging Bull and everything like that, you know, and Taxi Driver, even, you know, the paranoia kind of feel that happens towards the end of the film, and you know, just he just does it with such ease, Scorsese, and you know, just it's striking. It really is, easily one of the greatest films ever made, and you know, just every act is just perfect. I absolutely love this film. I love all the characters in this film. They're all so compelling. The relationships that are throughout the film, I just love. De Niro, of course, my favourite actor. You know, he's not the main role in this film, of course, and you know, Scorsese at times would call it kind of cameo. You know, and he wasn't originally planned to really be in the film, I don't think. But he is stunning. Joe Pesci is something else. You know, the way that he's so threatening. The cinematography, of course, plays a hand in that. You know, the scenes where you kind of he's surrounded by a kind of a mist, or like red. You know, the way in the bars and everything, the way he's portrayed, and it kind of the shadows and everything, and the way that the light comes from behind him, and you can see the kind of the dread coming through when things happen. You know, when he shoots that guy, who I won't say, bits like that. You know, it's something else. You know, it's such a really at times just one of the scariest characters in cinema. And it's great that he also adds the comedy Scorsese to the film, and particularly Joe Pesci is really the funniest character in the film, but also the scariest. And the performance is just top notch, as I've said. Wonderful the way he's able to do that. His best performance, I would say. And you know, I didn't quite feel as much as say Raging Bull in terms of the relationship and the bond that they have, him and De Niro, but in terms of an actual single performance, probably the best of Joe Pesci's career. Robert De Niro, of course, great. Lorraine Bracco is wonderful, and you know, just the way that this chronicles the lives of these the mob, and the way that it kind of the lessons it teaches you and stuff and all that, the way it relates to just it's just universal, you know, and I just think it's just one of the masterpieces of cinema. I've seen this film, you know, probably around about 30 times actually. It's you know it's among my sort of top 30 most watched films for sure. You know, I've seen it a lot of times, around about 30, as I say. Again, I'm not going to reveal what you know is my favourite of the three. Wait for my ranking on that. I still don't really know it, you know, exactly. But it's one of my top 60 films easily, and once again, just like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, it gets my absolute highest rating, and that is 100% plus, tier S, reserved for the magnum opuses of cinema, my bonus tier, and it is one of the finest films ever made. You know, overall everything, you know, everything about the film, the performances, the writing, the way that it just feels so natural, and a lot of it is, of course, ad-libbed and all that, you know, and but the genius just throughout the film and the script, the themes that he explores, the way he does it, just the execution of every scene, every scene really that has the music and has music in it is just it's done so well. It's just it has such an energy to it. Comparable. I would compare it to Boogie Nights. Paul Thomas Anderson's. It's very much like that, and the rise and fall in that way as well. But the way the camera moves, the tracking shots, and all this kind of stuff. Every single frame is perfect, absolutely perfect. Performances, not a flaw throughout the film. The character of Paulie as well, he's so good. This the performance and of course the character, really really important character in the film, Paulie. But just the way that Scorsese kind of shows the irony and everything of kind of how these gangsters' lives, and the way that he kind of as well explores paranoia and kind of loss and everything like that, and of course showing that it can't all last forever kind of thing. It's just wonderful. Absolutely flawless film, and beyond that, it's one of them films that is cinema. I'm not going to say it's not one of the greatest films of all time. It is, and it's one of them films. That most people that have seen it do like, at least. It'd be hard to kind of understand how people would hate this film. It has everything. It has so many things. Of course, romance as well, and it's just so compelling. The use of tension as well, and just the way it informs you at the same time, and being just one of the most enjoyable films of all time. It is cinema perfection, and really, it's just the only thing I could say is just it's just not quite Scorsese's best for me, I don't think, and not my favourite. So that just really all that is just praise for Scorsese even more, and it doesn't downplay this, of course. When I do my ranking, this won't be number one. My favourite Scorsese is very very unexpected, but this really is definitely one of his absolute best. I'll give a hint. It's in my top 4 Scorsese's, and yes, Goodfellas is a magnum opus. One of Scorsese's best. One of the best of the 90s for sure. Not the best film of the year. But I think it's just one of the best films ever made. So there you go. Goodfellas reviewed, and I cannot wait to review the rest of his films. I realised I didn't actually own The Departed, and here it is. It just came, and that'll be reviewed quite soon as well. I look forward to that. So yeah, thanks for watching my review of Martin Scorsese's absolute magnum opus, Goodfellas.